Hey everybody. So luckily, Dr. Schultz, who's played by Christoph Waltz from Django Unchained, has freed me. I got my freedom, so I'm able to finally do this movie review because I gotta tell you, slavery these days isn't very nice. So Django Unchained, you guys, that was kind of my little because that was actually the real theme that you'll hear at the beginning of the movie, and I just kind of wanted a little thing that you see at the beginning where Jamie Foxx and some other slaves are walking to their destination. Um, So anyway, guys, Django Unchained. It's Quentin Tarantino's latest film. It came out Christmas Day, um, and I am here today to review that film for you today. So in Django Unchained, you guys, we see Jamie Foxx as Django Freeman, and he's a slave that's at the beginning of the film. You'll see like they're sending him off to be sold somewhere to someone, and Christoph Waltz plays a guy named Dr. King Schultz, and he is a dentist turned bounty hunter, and he claims that he didn't that he kind of left the whole dentist thing behind him so he can pursue all this bounty hunter stuff, and he wants Django because Django knows the whereabouts of the Brittle brothers, who is the current group of people that he is after for his bounty hunting service. And so, through a series of events that I don't want to spoil for you, because actually it's pretty fun to watch how Django and Dr. Schultz team up. Um, so they team up and they go after these Brittle brothers. And it's hard to track these guys down because they're always changing their name, they're always traveling to places. Django isn't the only slave to be exposed to these guys who are really brutal around the slaves. And for those of you who don't know, this film does take place around the slavery era, which is around the 1800s, around the time like the Civil War happened and everything else. Um, and so, because Django knows who these Brittle brothers look like, him and this Christoph Waltz, who plays Dr. Schultz, travel the land to look for these guys. Um, and so after once again another series of events that I don't want to spoil because it's definitely a film where it's hard to explain without spoiling anything. So I'm trying to explain this film to you without ruining anything. So after more series of events, um, there's a scene that I can pretty much tell you because it's shown in the trailer, so it's not really spoiling anything. Um, where Dr. Schultz claims that if he helps him catch these Brittle brothers, he will go and help Django rescue his wife because his wife is a slave of a guy named Calvin Candy, who's played by Leonardo DiCaprio. And so Django wants, her back, and in order to get her back, he has to get her freedom as well, so that both of them can be free and actually be a couple again. And so, pretty much throughout the rest of the film, it's all about convincing Calvin Candy of a reasonable price to buy Django's wife back. And because Dr. Schultz isn't really a believer in slavery, he's willing to pretty much let her go right away. So her and Django can live out the rest of their lives happily ever after. But also, Django has to do his part and help Dr. Schultz catch these Brittle brothers. So as far as the positives and negatives go for this film, you guys, um, I loved the feeling of. So we're gonna do the positives first, as usual. I loved the feeling of the old Western movie. I liked how Tarantino had the washout look, the old film grains um, look on the screen. It really has a feeling like you're watching something from the '60s or '70s, and like seeing a Clint Eastwood, like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, or a John Wayne movie kind of a feeling. Um, Even the music of this film, obviously, certain parts it's very modern music, but there are certain parts like the opening theme that I showed at the beginning of the video where it does feel like something you'd see in. Because I know there was a series of Western films called the Django series, which Quentin based this movie off of, kind of his own version of Django. It felt like something I would have heard from one of the old original Django movies. Um, the opening credits, the end credits, even the opening Columbia logo was all stuff from way back in the day when those companies first started. So it was really cool that Quentin was able to track those down, kind of like what Ben Affleck did for Argo. For those who've seen that, kind of he did the original opening credits for the time period that he was kind of basing his film off of. Um, Another thing that's very notable about this film, you guys, is the performances of Christoph Waltz, Samuel L. Jackson, Jonah Hill for what he has. The scenes that he's a part of are really good in this. There's a scene that's actually briefly shown in the trailer involving the bags that they have to wear when looking for Django and Dr. Schultz. Um, Quentin Tarantino and Jamie Foxx also do a great job in this. And yes, Quentin does finally act in one of his own movies again. He hasn't done that in a while, and I'm kind of glad he did come back to do that because I think it's kind of fun to see. Kind of like what Alfred Hitchcock used to do, kind of do something in one of his own movies. And it was really cool to kind of see what Quentin chose to do. We don't get to see him until near the end of the film, but for what we see him in, kind of like with Jonah Hill, it's fun to see them for the time they had on screen. The humor in this is very effective. Every scene in this film that was meant to be funny was funny. I laughed. The audience laughed. The people I was with laughed. So very funny scenes in this. Once again, Quentin manages to find interesting monologues for his movie. He's definitely one of those guys that, if you know the Tarantino filmmaking style very well. He likes to hold off on the action simply because he wants to make sure those interesting monologues are in there to kind of help build up for that action. It's kind of an interesting way to for him to hint toward you that a big action scene is going to happen soon or something big is going to happen. And to do that, he kind of leads you into that with an interesting conversation like, okay, where's this going to go? Where's this going to go? Where's this going to go? Um, he homages and tributes classic films in this. He There was one thing in here where I was whispering to my cousin when I saw this. That has to be from Rocky, because there's this thing where a title scrolls on the screen like that really slowly, and I swear it's from Rocky. I think that was the homage he was trying to use for that. Um, so there's a lot of things like that where you watch and like, oh wait, that could have been from Good, Bad, the Ugly. That could have been from the original Django movies and everything. Um, he pokes fun at the slavery era. He There's a lot of scenes in here where some of these characters are kind of aware that they're in the slavery era, or people react in a certain way, like, "Wait, why is that black guy riding that horse?" and all that kind of stuff. Like, there's even a scene in here where I'm obviously going to tell you the G-rated version, of course, but where him and Christoph Waltz are riding through town, and Christoph Waltz is like, "Why is everybody looking at us so weirdly?" And Jamie Foxx is like, well, because they probably haven't seen a black guy on a horse. Um, on as far as the negatives go, you guys, I did feel this film was a little slow moving at times, and I'm not criticizing the monologues because I love the monologues as usual in a usual Tarantino film where he has kind of these long monologues and then they lead into an action scene. I was fine with that again, but there were some scenes in here that weren't intended to be monologues, just like actual scenes, where it just kind of really moved along very slowly. There's a scene specifically with Leo DiCaprio at a dinner table with Django and Dr. Schultz, and Samuel L. Jackson was involved with the scene too. And I swear that scene went on for like 45 minutes, and I just think they could have picked up the pace a little bit more with that scene specifically. Um, and like I said, some of it wasn't even the monologue stuff, and so I really wish Tarantino managed to kind of pick up the pace on some of his other scenes. Um, I felt there was some over dramatized effects for certain scenes. Either they went on for too long, or they just weren't on. They were just unnecessary to begin with. There's a scene where, without me spoiling anything, where Django, I think he's hunting down one of the Brittle brothers or someone they're hunting down for the bounty hunting business, and just the effect they used went on for too long. It was one of those slow motion things, and it's like, okay, come on, pick up the pace. Um, Calvin Candy, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, I did feel his character could have been a little bit more interesting. It was fine for what they had, but there was something about him that I didn't like. I know he was a villain, and we're not supposed to like him or anything, but there was just kind of like when I saw the movie Skyfall. I liked Harvey R. Bardem as the lead villain of that movie because Sam Mendes gave him interesting things to do. And I really wish Calvin Candy had that characteristic to him. He was just kind of the generic villain that was, who the wealthy plantation owner who was, mean to everybody. And there was just something about him I really wish they could have done more with because the trailer really hinted toward a guy that was kind of basically I wanted the Calvin Candy we saw in the trailer and not what Tarantino eventually had for the real movie. So I guess that's kind of the best way to say it. Um, there was some major story conflicts in this movie that got resolved too quickly or too easily. And to tell you the truth, I would have liked to have seen Django and Dr. Schultz be really into a pickle. Like I wanted them to be put in a situation at least once or twice in this film where it was really hard for them to get out of it. Really, I want these guys to be challenged more often because there was just so many scenes in here where they easily got their tasks done. It almost feels like they were able to get this all done in a day. And I really wish that because this era and time was so tragic and hard for people, I really wish they really got more challenges to face on their journey because to me it just they kind of resolved them way too quickly in my opinion. Um, so anyway, guys, I give this film an 8.5 out of 10. It is a very good film, despite those negative things I said about it. I still really enjoyed it, and I think a lot of Tarantino fans are really gonna like this. It's definitely one of those films where I'll be shocked if you hate it more so. Like I think I would say a good 90% of the people who are gonna go see this movie are gonna like it. The other 10% are probably going to hate it either because they hate Quentin Tarantino or, like I said, that maybe the slow moving scenes are really going to hurt the experience for them. Um, but other than that, I think this film is great. It's definitely worth seeing over this holiday season with all the other films that came out around Christmas time. So Django Unchained, you guys, I give it 8.5 out of 10. It's very good. If you love Tarantino's work, if you love spaghetti westerns, make sure you see this one.